took a pillow and put it right. Truth. Only the truth can set us free. And so the truth is that if you're lazy, like Paul says in 2 Thessalonians, if you don't work, you don't eat. Well, if you're not eating, you're going to say, well, I need to change my behavior. Now, I'm talking about those who can work. Obviously, there are those who can't, who have disabilities. That's a whole different picture. But Paul is very, very bold here in saying, if you can work, you should work. And the incentive is what's going to motivate you. In fact, I love this an economic professor who was trying to teach his class the importance of this principle. And the class had been so brainwashed in socialism. They're like, well, socialism is good, and everybody just put it all in the same trough, and that would all be good. And he said, well, all right, how about this? Next test came back, and the A students worked really hard. They got A's and B's. A bunch of people goofed off, and they got D's and F's. And he gave everybody in the class a C+. Well, the D and F students are like, hey, this is great. Worked for me. I didn't work at all, and I got a C+. The A and B students said, I worked really hard, and I get a C+. And the economics professor said, hey, the good news is you worked really hard to bring the grade of everybody up. Well, sounds really nice. What happened the next test? Next test, the A, B students said, well, if I'm only going to get a C, I'll do worse. The D and F students said, hey, this worked great last time. I'll do it again. Well, the whole grade of the class came down from a C+ now to a D- everybody got. Because when you give everybody the same grade or give everybody the same incentive, you're actually punishing the producers and you're rewarding those who are lazy. And it's always a downward spiral. Even though it sounds good in theory, socialism, the idea of taking from producers, taking their incentive away and giving to those who are lazy, it never works. It's never worked in history. And the idea that Christianity promotes this is just not at all in the Scriptures, nor is it in history.
It's so interesting to hear that perspective because there's so many different perspectives coming at us all the time. And as Christians, we are taught certainly to be radical givers. And
Without a doubt.
If somebody is in need, right, to offer a hand up and not a hand out. But many times I think, what it is seeing, is that situation changing? In my life when I have needed a hand up, am I doing something then to change my own situation, to own my own life,
right,
to be responsible and to move in that, right? And so I think that's also, a great gauge of knowing when to give.
Without a doubt. I mean, when I was in Chicago, I had homeless guys who were coming past me every day. I worked at a methadone clinic, and so I'd be leaving from college. I'd run over to my part-time job, and I've always had somebody there. And I would take folks and take them into Taco Bell and buy them food. I remember I had one guy came to Taco Bell with me, and he's like, well, I don't really like that taco. I'm like, well, listen, I got 59 cents. That's what I'm buying for lunch. I'll give it to you. And I love this guy because every day he told me the same story. So I figured after day 2 that his car had not just broke down, and he didn't just need some money to get to the next place. So I think we need to be incredibly generous. We need to see our act of generosity as a chance to minister to Christ, because Christ says, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. But at the same time, we need to be wise and discerning to say, this is good stewardship. And is this really helping somebody get to a better place? Or is it really enabling their bad behavior?
Exactly. And keeping them in a place of, like you said, dependency and of expecting for others to reap what they're sowing in their life and step in and take the hit on that, which makes me think of a principle that I heard recently that kind of stuck with me, Chad. A woman I interviewed recently talked about in her great time of economic need, she started sowing her own needs. She started giving away that which she really wanted. Does Christ speak at all about that? Giving away and sowing in times of need and being generous?
I do think so. Yeah, I do think so. I mean, Jesus has that one principle that says to find your life is to lose it. And in one sense, by getting your eyes off yourself, you're able to then invest back. It's better to give than to receive. And I think that's more than just financially. I heard a quote one time that said the best cure for depression is to go out and help your neighbor. Because what happens if you've ever been through a depression, I went through a real serious one when I was in high school, and you just get so focused on yourself, and it's the fear that the depression will come back, and even those good moments get sabotaged by the fear that the bad moments are coming back, and you just get so self-focused. But to be able to look to your neighbor and say, I want to encourage somebody else, I want to focus on other people's needs, it ends up changing everything. And I think the same thing financially. I mean, even this year, we just got back from Belize. We took 80 folks down to Belize, and it was so exciting to go down there with 80 people. We had a surgical team that gave away free health care, and we repaired people's ears and cleft palates, and just amazing. Every night we shared stories, and everybody was changed in that. This one guy with cerebral palsy who lives in this village, the doctors told him he was going to die when he was born, and nobody helped him even walk. He was literally crawling around the village until he was 10. Finally, at 10, somebody said, I guess he's going to survive. Let's teach him to walk. And so here's this guy, Ishmael, and we got a chance to build him a home. And it was so fantastic to build a home. He's now the most eligible bachelor. He's probably in his mid-20s now. And one guy from our church who builds custom homes brought this shower head this brand new shower head, a couple $1,000 shower head. The whole house costs $5,000, but he, of course, has a supplier. He brings the shower head. This might be the only actual practical use for the shower head. It's got 3 jets on the side. Because he can't turn his body quite right, it allows him to wash his whole body with this. So we got literally this concrete block house with this $1,000 shower head on it, helping wash this just beautiful guy with cerebral palsy. And to be there at that moment when he got the keys to his house and to see everybody come together and celebrate that was just really, really exciting.
Oh, that is a beautiful story. You know, we are called as Christians to be radically generous. If someone's listening right now and saying, you know, I'm so caught up in myself and the fear mentality of taking care of myself, how do we break out of that, Chad?
The Bible talks about being careful of covetousness or coveting, and I think there are a lot of faces of that. I mean, there's overspending, there's hoarding. Hoarding can be covetousness, which is, I find my security in my savings. Savings is important, but ultimately savings are not your security. There's a entitlement greed or coveting, which is that I deserve what's yours even though I haven't worked for it. So I think the steps would be the 3 Ps. Priority giving. Think about giving to God's priorities. We have no problem giving to ourselves.
What a great point.
We can talk ourselves into investing in ourselves. Everything we do is an investment. Everything we give to ourselves or spend on ourselves. It's more saying, how can I be rich toward God? Even the parable of Jesus and the man with the bigger barns, he says the problem was he was rich toward himself, not rich toward God. So I would say, P, what are God's priorities? And how do I give to those priorities? 2, percentage. How can I give away a percentage of my income? And if you're not giving away any percentage, I would encourage you, you will experience incredible joy by saying, I'm going to start by giving away 1%. And you just start investigating, how could I take that 1% and give to other people? And it will just change your entire outlook. And also it says, I'm trusting God to be my provider, not my savings account, not even my income. It's actually coming from God, so it totally changes your focus. And then 3rd P is progressive giving, which I want to become progressively more generous each year. In fact, Christmas last year, one of my favorite stories, the kids got together, and every year we look at how we can be more generous. And we had a family in our church who was really struggling. They were possibly going to lose their home, and so we were looking at ways that Beth and I could provide for that. But the kids, too, I said, now, we got some friends who are in real dire need, and they may not have any Christmas gifts. I said, what should you give them? And they brought this junky old toy out that they hadn't played with in years. I said, would you want to receive that? Well, no. And we had the most powerful moment as a family. They actually were in tears at the end of it. I said, I'm not going to force you to give, because God doesn't force us to give. I'm just going to say, let's ask questions. Let's deepen your heart. Would you want to receive that? I said, what would you want to receive? And they said, a DS. Well, they had a DS, and they had a Game Boy. I said, what if you gave your DS away? That's like $100, maybe $150. That's big. I said, listen, Daddy is not going to make you do it, because coercive giving never changes your heart. And yet they wrestled with it, and they decided to give it. And we were in tears as a family on the couch as they were wrestling with their own greed. And the joy they experienced that Christmas, I have no idea what we bought the kids. And we had the Christmas tree with all the gifts, but I will remember that memory for the rest of my life.
Oh, that is awesome. I love what you're saying about the joy that comes